In this video, we're going to be talking about a book called What Every Pianist Needs to Know About the Body. Before we get into the video, I really recommend checking out the book. It's a really great one, and I won't be covering every single thing said in the book. I'm just going to summarize the chapters. So let's get into it. Now we'll talk about the use of the thumb. So the belief that the finger starts at the MCP joint is especially harmful in case of the thumb. If you ask many people where their thumb starts, they're gonna point to their MCP joint. But actually, the thumb starts at the CMC joint, not the MCP. That is where the movement should occur. The movement at the MCP joint is usually a compensation for the loss of movement at the CMC joint. The muscles surrounding the metacarpal bone of the thumb will be tense, and often the tension will extend to the forearm as well. The CMC joint of the thumb is saddle-shaped, permitting a wide range of up and down motion and sideways motion but not rotation. Passing the thumb under should be a movement of the thumb at the CMC joint, not at the MCP joint. Also, in passing the thumb should move only as far as it can go without tension. It should not be fixed or squeezed under the hand. There are many pianistic situations where the most efficient point of contact with the key is the front corner of the thumb. This is often true in arpeggios or situations of going from black key played with the long finger to a white key played with the thumb. In such situations, playing too far down on the side of the thumb puts the entire arm lower and hampers the movement to whatever note comes after the thumb. In other situations, such as playing white key trills, using 1 and 3, it is indeed easier to use the side of the thumb. Although the thumb moves principally from the CMC joint, it does not move in isolation from the rest of the arm. When the thumb is efficiently used, it receives support from the entire forearm through the forearm arch. There can be a very slight feeling of tilting or rotation in the forearm in playing of the thumb to distribute the effort across the entire forearm, giving a sense of stability with virtually no effort. Now we're going to talk about the movement of the fingers of the MCP joint. So the thumb moves principally from the CMC joint. Other fingers also move at their CMC joint, but the movements are small. The largest movement for the fingers 2 and 5 occur at the MCP joint, sometimes called the main knuckle. Many pianists have been injured by exercises undertaken in the name of stretching the fingers. When we understand what sort of movements are possible at the MCP joint, we can avoid those injuries. First, every pianist should locate the MCP joint. That is easy to do. When you look at the back of the hand, the joint is obvious. It is the main knuckle. If someone imagines that the crease between the palm and the fingers indicate the location of the joint, the movements will be stiff. The fingers move at the MCP joint in two ways, up and down and sideways. The up and down movements of the fingers at the MCP joint are free and easy. They are used constantly in playing the piano and are the finger movements that are the most obvious to observers. It is a bad idea to only move at the MCP joint. Just concentrating the movement at the MCP joint alone isolates the finger from the remainder of the arm and creates tension. Pianists need to be aware of the fingers extending back from the MCP joint to the wrist. The sideways movement of the MCP joint are called abduction and adduction. Notice that abduction and adduction at the MCP joint is slower and more difficult than the up and down movements. We can rotate our forearm with our elbows bent or straight or anywhere in between. The movements of the flexing and abducting the fingers at the MCP joint are not independent in that sense. Just try moving the 2 and 5 fingers all together up and down as freely as you can. At the MCP joint, notice that as you bend the MCP joint, the tip of your fingers tend to move closer together. From that, we can understand that the abducting of the fingers at the MCP joint is only possible when the joint is extended, not when it is bent. The reason is that there is a ligament, the collateral ligament, on each side of the MCP joint. This ligament is slack when the joint is straight and taut when the joint is bent. It also makes up and down movements more difficult with the fingers spread apart. No amount of practicing will change this fact. For example, moving the fingers up and down while holding them spread apart in arpeggios cannot be as fast and easy as the motions with the fingers close together. It generates tension. An efficient and safe technique will not attempt to move the fingers rapidly up and down while holding them spread apart, nor will it use spreading or stretching the fingers as a means to cover distances in a single note playing. Instead, it will train the arm to move sideways to cover the distances while keeping the fingers in the neutral position from which they can move freely. The second and the third joint of the fingers, the PIP and the DIP joints, move only by bending and unbending. Movements at the PIP and DIP joints can be used in piano playing depending on one's technique, but pianists do need to be aware of the dangers of habitually curling these joints without proper release. Notice that though curling movements are very strong, they are not very fast or easy compared to the up and down movements of the MCP joint. The reason for this will be covered in the next chapter.